welcome to Mr. Sleepy Hollow Explorations. As someone who also struggles with sleep, I know how helpful these videos can be, and I'm thrilled to share this with you, with a few calming twists. Don't worry, the screen will gently fade away in the next 5 minutes. And if you prefer, you can follow along with the subtitles, too. Before you go to sleep, I'd love to know where in the world are you listening from. Drop a comment and share. And if this video brings you a bit more peace or helps you relax, please consider subscribing, like, and leaving a comment to let me know. Sweet dreams and happy relaxing. This stalker. I was 16 and me and my friend, I'll call Evan and Jake, wanted to rent a hotel for the night since it was spring break. We got to the hotel and checked in. It had a really funky smell, but we still stayed there. Once we got to our room, it was about 3 p.m., so we decided to go swimming. The pool was downstairs, departed from the hotel once we got to the entrance. There was a man at least 6 foot 3 inches all black with a hood, covering his face facing us. I panicked a little bit, not loud. We got into the pool and swam for a few hours until we saw that man again, all black, sitting on a chair by the pool. I cleared my throat. Can I help you, sir? I asked. No response. I still eased a little paranoid. I put my face in the water, and at the bottom of the pool was another figure that was all black. I screamed like a little girl and ran for the door. I looked back and saw nothing. Not the guy in the chair, or the guy under the pool. My friends thought I was just seeing things, but I saw what I saw as clear as water. Didn't feel like swimming anymore, so I decided to get dinner at the nearby restaurant. I got a table for me and my friends to sit in, and there I saw once again the man all in black on the other side of the dining room, and was staring at me. I had enough. I went over there and I lost track of them and we took off. After we had, I decided this trip has gone too far, and we should leave tomorrow morning, but my friends didn't like that idea. Once it was 10:30, I and my friends dozed off in the hotel room. I woke at the noises. I saw a shadow, a figure at the end of my bed. I calmed myself down and told myself that it was my hat that I put there before I went to bed. I went to bed and got woken up again 30 minutes later to more noises. I was getting thirsty, so I reached under the bed and tried to grab my water bottle, but I grabbed something, and I was totally shocked by what I grabbed. It was my hat. I was not ever more scared in my life. I couldn't help but to scream at the top of my lungs when I heard a voice next to my ear say, "You're a bitch." I jumped out of bed and realized it was 2 men in black right there. I tried to fight them, but there's no use. Once they grabbed me, dragged me out of that room. I tried to scream, but that guy was covering my mouth. I passed out and woken up in a stretcher. It turned out those guys knifed me while I passed out, and someone coughed in. But the doctor said no one could catch the guys who got me. To this day, I was of a nightlight at night, so I'm scared. This is not a suicide note. 3 months ago, I learned of my uncle's passing. We weren't particularly close, but he left me one of his houses in the well. I was touched, but just wanted to sell it off. I am a fairly new father of twin girls. I didn't need another thing to manage right now. To speed up the process, I decided to travel across the country to live in the house until a sale was assured. My job just requires a laptop and phone, so I was approved to work remotely for the time being. Unfortunately, my wife had to stay at her job, so I had to come alone. At first, I treated it as a mini vacation. I had hoped it would only last a week, but the process was more involved than I thought. I had a realtor taking care of most things, but after a month I'm still here. I noticed things going wrong right away. Stuff was never where I last placed it. I'd see shadows out of the corner of my eye. I'd lose track of time constantly. I thought it was caused by stress. loneliness, except for the few times a realtor came by with prospective buyers. The house was the quietest place I ever been in. Before I completely lost my mind, the neighbor came by with a dog. She was an elderly woman who explained that she had been dog-sitting while my uncle was in hospital. Now that I was here, she thought I should take Buster, the golden retriever. I thought the neighbor might have been forgetful because she seemed to think my uncle had just passed last week. Either way, I fell in love with Buster, and his presence was exactly what I needed. I even thought it would be a tremendous present to bring home to my girls. I just hoped my wife would feel the same way. However, even the dog could tell something was wrong with the house. Buster accepted his new living arrangements pretty quickly and would never willingly go upstairs. This was all right with me at the time. I thought it would make it easier to keep track of him. Then Buster disappeared. Literally, 1 second he was standing right behind me as I was opening the treat jar to give him a snack. My eyes left him for just a moment to put the jar back, and then he was gone. I ran through the whole house calling his name. The kitchen was connected to the living room, and on the other end of that was the master bedroom and study. The other end of the kitchen led to a dining room, which was connected to the entrance hall that also led into the living room, the stairs to the second floor. After walking upstairs, you had a choice of right or left along a balcony, overlooked the living room on one side and entrance on the other. Going left led immediately to a guest room and game room. Going right led to 2 more guest rooms and a bathroom at the end of the hall. I looked in every room and had to accept that somehow the dog made it outside, even though there was no doggy door, and every door and window had been closed and locked. So I searched the surrounding neighborhood for another hour before giving up. I was thinking about making flyers when I opened the front door and heard Buster scrambling towards me from the kitchen. I was ecstatic, of course, but I just couldn't wrap my head around how I could have missed him. I let Buster sleep in the bed with me that night. In hindsight, it was a huge mistake, but it made me feel better at the time. Things picked up at work, though, and I soon forgot about all the strangers surrounding this house. Clients called me constantly, but we are getting a lot done, and I landed multiple large contracts in a row. I was working around the clock, but I knew I'd be due a promotion once I returned to the home office. Several times I'd get lost in a phone call or a spreadsheet and suddenly find that it was nighttime. I'd be so absorbed with work that I would block out Buster whining for food or to go outside. I started to set alarms to keep track, but I had too many important clients to slow down. I was on top of the world, but my health was starting to suffer. I forget to eat and even sleep sometimes. There was always something else to do or someone to talk to. I even got better at taking care of Buster, better than I was taking care of myself at least. Then my good mood ended with a bang. Literally, Buster was whining behind me as I finished another spreadsheet. So we both heard a door slam upstairs. For the first time since I brought him inside, Buster ran upstairs by himself. I almost called the cops, but I felt silly with the phone in my hand. I started to doubt I had heard anything at all. And if there were an intruder, surely Buster would have been making more noise. So I mustered all the courage I could manage and climbed upstairs with frying pan as my weapon. It was dark upstairs, but enough moonlight was coming in from the downstairs windows for me to make out Buster standing in front of the bathroom. I had purposely closed every door when I last came through here looking for the lost dog. This door was now wide open. I flicked on the hallway light, but nothing happened. With no better ideas, I raised my frying pan high and walked slowly to the bathroom. There was no window in here, so it was pure darkness inside. I was terrified. Bizarrely, Buster just looked frozen. His tail stood straight up, and he just stood there pointed towards the door. I tried to take it as a good sign that he still wasn't barking. That's what finally got me through the threshold and into the bathroom. The whole time my eyes had been getting used to the darkness, and the bathroom was too small for there to have been anyone there without me noticing. I started to relax, so I took a step forward into something sticky. I suddenly realized that I had my cell phone in my pocket. I pulled it out and turned it on to cast some light on the floor. I immediately dropped it at the sight of the bright red liquid that surrounded my feet. I fled the stairs and this triggered Buster to follow. This time I had no trouble calling the police. Thankfully, there was already a patrol car nearby, so 2 officers arrived within a couple of minutes. Their powerful flashlights cut through the darkness like knives, but they soon found nothing was wrong with the upstairs lights. Something did appear to be wrong with my pipes, though, as they called out from above that the puddle was just rusty water. Because of their insistence, I climbed up the stairs again, and clearly saw a muddy brown puddle in the bathroom. The banging must have been from a pipe breaking. Both cops had a laugh at my expense, or otherwise understanding. They even gave me a number of good plumber that my cell phone was Rowan after I dropped and left it in the puddle. I would have to use the one landline in the kitchen from now on. I let them out and promised to call the plumber first thing in the morning. Yet, as exhausted as I was, I couldn't go to sleep over that excitement, so I stayed up to draft some more important documents for my company. Before I knew it, Buster had made another mess in the living room. I was dead tired, and said some things to Buster maybe I shouldn't have, and I did some things to him that I know I really shouldn't have. I decided to do something about the stress I had been under, and I spoke to my supervisor that same morning. To my surprise, they were happy to let me have a week off as a sort of mental vacation. Just like that, all my outstanding work was taken away. With nothing else to do, I tried to focus on Buster. I played games with him and fed him a bunch of treats to make up for my earlier neglect. Then I found the first vintage. Didn't notice it for some time, since I had been avoiding the second floor. But I realized that I hadn't actually called the plumber. Before doing so, I went upstairs to see if things had gotten any worse. Instead, I immediately saw a message written in red on the hallway wall. "You're afraid losing your mind." For a second, I kinda did. I was scared to death at the thought if someone had have sneaked into my house while I was there. Probably when I was sleeping. I won't bear repeating everything I said, or did right after. Looks to say I am becoming braver since obeying. Eventually, I unlocked my bedroom door and made my way to the kitchen with Buster leading the way. I called the police again. Those same 2 officers were able to show up, and then, slowly, we cleared every inch of the house. Yet, we found no one. Everything was locked. No sign of forced entry. The police actually took me seriously, something that bewildered me at the time, and admitted that this isn't the first house in this neighborhood to experience it. There had been a series of break-ins where nothing was stolen, but the police officers still offered to have a car sit outside for the night. Even though I took them up on this, I soon realized that I'd never get to sleep tonight in this house. So I called my only friend in town, and really in the whole state, an old college roommate, who coincidentally lived 30 minutes away. He offered to pick me and Buster up in a few hours, so I busied myself with packing up my suitcase. I didn't know how long it would need, so I pretty much packed everything I had brought with me to the house in the first place. I left my room to pick up some dotty toys when my friend called to say he was waiting outside. I decided to hang up the phone and meet him immediately. I needed the human company, and he could help me move my stuff. But the driveway was empty. There was no friend, no car. I called him back immediately, and he insisted he was outside. I listened to him get out of his car and walk up to the front door. He knocked, and I could hear the door open, and an elderly woman greet him. My friend asked for my name and mentioned my uncle. The woman said she had never heard of either of us. For thanking her, my friend left and asked me if I'd gotten all that. I told him I must have given him the wrong address. He rattled off the correct one and confirmed he was there. After asking him to wait, and I left the house again. I walked out to the street and looked back at the numbers written on the card and on the mailbox. Only there weren't any numbers. Just a message losing your mind on the card, written in a red. The temptation to leave right away was great. I could just start walking in for stop. But I had to get my stuff and, more importantly, Buster, so I entered the house one last time. When I came back to the room, my suitcase was empty. Everything I had just spent the last hour packing up was back in its proper place. Despite how impossible this was, I focused on only one goal. We needed to leave. I put a leash on Buster and was shocked to see how hardened he was. I resolved to make it up to him when this was all over. I tried to leave out the front door like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't open it. The knot turned freely, but the deadbolt wouldn't slide back. I was really scared now that Buster was in help. I knelt down to give him a hug, and it gave me an idea while looking my face. Whatever was happening, it sure wasn't the result of a maniac hiding in my house. Still, I didn't know if forces were actually opposing me, so I walked to the backyard and said loudly, "Well, Buster, time for a little walk." The glass door slid open easily. Buster bounded out happily. I guess it had been a long time since I let him outside. I followed more tentatively, and for the first time, examined the backyard closely. There was iron fence around the yard with another space between the bars that Buster could slip through. And then I saw it, a tree that grew too close to the fence, and had several branches extending through and above it. I assumed the gate would be supernatural locked too, so this was my exit. Buster didn't need any prodding. He waited patiently for me on the other side as I painfully pulled myself up and over the fence. I was suddenly aware of how weak and tired my recent lifestyle had made me. When I was in the process of climbing down the tree on either side, Buster growled once, and then took off like a shot towards a nearby hill. I jumped down and gave chase. He disappeared over the top, and I scrambled to keep up on the surprisingly steep surface. Luckily, I found where someone had laid some stone bricks into the side for an easier way up. It was still steep enough that I had to focus on placing my feet correctly to keep from sliding, so I was looking down. When I next reached up resulted in my hand grabbing carpet. Confused, I looked to see the second floor landing. I looked down to see the rest of the stairs that led to the entrance hall and living room of the house. Buster was nowhere to be found. Demoralized and dead tired, I crawled the final steps. Just sat on the landing for a while, occasionally calling for Buster. Eventually, the kitchen phone rang. Whatever ghosts were messing with me, I realized they couldn't stop outside forces from helping. I tumbled down the stairs in my haste and landed hard on the cold tiles below. But I was only dazed for a second, and Sue was in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. My wife's warm voice filled me with hope. She was concerned that she hadn't heard from me in a while. I couldn't recall the last time I had even tried. She was trying to tell me that my work hadn't heard from me in a week, or I tried to tell her to call the police. Her words gave me pause, though. I asked, "What do you mean?" I was given the week off. "Dear, I thought you were supposed to continue working as soon as you got there." "Oh, yeah, but they gave me a week off because of all the stress I've been under." "Wait a second. How long have I been out here?" "Honey, you've been gone almost 9 days now." My stomach sunk, but I didn't hesitate to say, "Listen, you need to call the cops. Something is wrong. I think I'm having a medical emergency." I had just been trying to come up with an excuse to limit the amount of follow-up questions, but I ended up realizing that this was actually the most likely explanation. Maybe I was just suffering from a gas leak or brain tumor. Ironically, either of those options seemed preferable than living in a haunted house. My wife asked, "Baby, what's wrong? Are you okay?" I thought I saw a shadow move out of the corner of my eye as I answered, "Yes, I'm okay. But no, I need help. There's something wrong with this house." "They aren't making any sense. Just listen to me. Call the police and tell them my uncle's name. Tell them to come to this house. An ambulance might be needed. Please help me. Please help you, pretty please," with a cherry on top. I stared at the phone in my hand as my wife's voice continued to come out of it. It sounded like her, but in a mocking tone I'd never actually heard from her before. She said, "Did you tummy hurt? When's the last time you ate? I wonder what Buster tastes like." I slammed the phone down, but whatever it was on the other side was right. My stomach was hurting. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten. On cue, I heard Buster whining from upstairs. Only after I started running towards the stairs did I notice just how bruised and sore my legs were from my spill down those steps. I pushed through the pain and climbed the stairs yet again. Buster was back in front of the bathroom, lying on his side and looking thinner than I had ever seen him. "Losing your mind" was written all over the hallway now, including on the ceiling and floor. I no longer had any doubt the messages were written in blood. Some of them were still drooping. I walked over and picked up Buster while a bang started at my front door. I would have jumped if Buster hadn't been weighing me down. I heard the front door open and whoever's identified themselves as the police. I even recognized the voice as belonging to one of the officers who have visited previously. Why can't I remember his name? After calling out that I was upstairs, I turned with Buster and found the hallway stretched before me, many times its original length. Despite how thin he looked, Buster felt heavier than ever. I knew this was all just some sort of trap to not get me in touch with the police officer. I thought I must have really been talking to my wife. She had to have come to calling the police, and the ghost just restored the end of the call. So I started my trip back to the stairs and shuffled my feet as fast as I could, yelling all the way. But then a voice answered the police officer, a woman's voice, my wife's voice. I could hear her say, "I'm sorry. My husband wasn't feeling well. He's resting in the bedroom." I screamed as loud as I could just to get attention. But it was no use. I heard the officers say, "I'd like to check up on him," all the same. Sure, come in, he's right till here." It was right out of a nightmare. I was sweating profusely, while every step seemed to get me nowhere. I tried to speed up, but the hallway just stretched further. And then I heard a man's blood-curdling scream from downstairs. Suddenly, the hallway snapped back, and I found myself somehow right at the top of the stairs. My momentum couldn't be stopped. I fell down the stairs and landed hard, on top of Buster. He howled in pain, but at least he was alive. I saw a long, thick trail of blood go around the corner and under the closed bedroom door. There is still a shadow of something under the door. I painfully crept to the kitchen and grabbed my trusty frying pan before making my way back to the bedroom door as quietly as I could. My eyes watched the moving shadows nervously. Whatever was waiting there had killed a man. That meant it could kill me. But if it could have a physical impact, then surely it had to be susceptible to a physical impact too. So I raised the frying pan and slowly started to turn the handle. Before I made much progress, the door flew open on its own, and something turned suddenly to me. I swung my frying pan down. The cop stood before me, frozen on his face. We both looked down at the knife plunged into his chest. My hand was still wrapped around the handle. He fell to the side, and I fell backwards to sit heavily on the now clean floor. I was positive I had tipped up the frying pan. I could remember its weight. But now I also remembered going to the kitchen and pulling out the knife. I seriously wondered if I was losing my mind. I looked down to find I had the knife in my hands again. I dropped it at once and crawled back to check on Buster. He was loving. I put my head on his flank and was devastated to feel he was still warm but not breathing. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. I did nothing for a long time. I was lethargic, but somehow made it to the couch in the living room. I waited there until nightfall, and then slept on the couch. When I woke up, I waited some more. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but nothing horrible was happening to me while I waited. I wasn't in a hurry to change that. But the bodies of Buster and the cop were still there. I needed to do something. My stomach rumbled as I finally got off the couch. There was another problem with just staying put. First things first, I found a shovel in an outdoor closet attached to the backyard porch. Digging the hole was exhausting, so I said, "Oh, they're just burying Buster now." I planned on getting to the cop after finding something to eat. I picked up Buster and carried him outside. His fur was still so warm. It was hard to believe he was gone, but there was no life behind his big brown eye. I gently laid him down the hole and got to work. Some time later, I wandered into the kitchen and raided the pantry. The house was quiet apart from my efforts. Whenever I stopped moving, the silence was complete. I wondered if the ghosts had just been trying to make me a murder after. Now that their goal had been met, maybe they would leave me alone for a while. Just in time because I was starving and didn't need any more distractions. I opened a box of cereal and had a handful up to my lips when I paused. How could I tell I was actually eating what I was looking at? What if I had actually been opening a box of rat poison? I still wasn't sure what these ghosts were capable of. I imagined the food turning into worms after it was already in my mouth. With that thought, I threw the cereal to the ground and stomped off, no longer hungry. I needed to concentrate my efforts on leaving this place. Right on cue, I walked to the front door. It was wide open. Instinctively, I made a leap for it before stopping with my outstretched hand, just a foot short of the door. This had to be another trick. I could see the door slamming shut in my face, or even taking a few of my fingers with it. I could feel a breeze enter the house, but I was too scared to move. This was the most impossible situation I'd ever been in, or even heard of. All of my senses had failed me before. However, my need for freedom eventually caused my feet to move. Upon slowly exiting the house, I saw the cop car just sitting in my driveway. The door was unlocked, and the keys were sitting in the front seat. My mind went wild trying to explain the situation. Maybe the cop was secretly a murderer and had killed previous owners of this house. Maybe his sacrifice helped them move on. I couldn't think of any other explanation for my good luck at the time. So I just pushed my misgivings down and got in. I drove out of the neighborhood without incident, but I had new problems. I was in an unfamiliar city, driving a cop car. No money or other belongings on me, and I had no idea what to do next. So I kept driving. It felt good to be free of the house. It felt good to see the sun. So I kept driving. On and on. Left turn. Right turn. Left turn. Right turn. No idea where I'm going. And then I realized I hadn't seen any other cars on the road for some time. Where was everyone? Where was I? The sinking feeling happened again, in the pit of my stomach, but also around the whole body. I sunk back into the car seat, and then realized I was sitting in an armchair, back in the living room of my uncle's house. My arms were up like I was still holding onto a steering wheel. I started to cry with frustration as I stood up and screamed. How long had I been sitting there with a stupid grin, moving my arms up and down like a madman? I turned around and saw my work laptop in the dining room table. It was on and glowing for me. I walked over to it and saw that something was already written down in this post. It read, "Lost your mind, good. Now you won't mind losing the wrist." Suddenly my fist fell way down. I raised it to find another kitchen knife in my hand. I dropped it immediately. I erased the message and started to type out a request for help. I ignored the screen and just focused on the keys. But I kept hitting them wrong, and another message slowly formed. "I'm sorry. I disappointed you all for the last time. Goodbye. Could have streamed again, but I noticed something had changed. I wasn't in the dining room anymore. I was in the study. I kept writing and writing and writing, and my own words started to come out. I have sent out emails requesting help. I have posted on the local police department's Facebook for assistance, and have just tried to keep writing no matter what. This is my latest attempt to keep my sanity. Whenever I try to take a break, I find myself in a new room, with new horrors descending on me. Once I opened the study door out to a hellish landscape, and almost stepped out onto lava. I wasn't sure if it was all an illusion, but I didn't even want to have a vision of my feet burning, so I just closed the door and resumed writing. I'm not even sure this is all because of ghosts. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and the truth is simply that I have no idea what's going on. As I've gone over these crazy events, I've realized that I can't recall my uncle's name, or what he looked like. I'm not sure I ever had an uncle. I'm trying to think really hard about how I came here. Did I fly? I can't remember, but I've always been here. Even weirder, I can't remember my realtor's name, or even what gender they are. I've met them in person several times. Why don't I know things I should? I can't even remember the name of my daughters or my wife. Am I even a father? Am I even a person? I know it must be because here I am writing in this small study. But now that I think about it, I can't remember who my parents are, what they look like, or anything about my childhood. Now I just remember this house and all the nightmares, waking and otherwise, I've experienced here. I'm feeling a lot like I was back in the cop car. I found a way forward, but I really don't know what to do next. This is not a way to live, and I'm getting more and more tired. I'm so hungry, and I'm finding it harder to focus. I keep hearing voices, and they're getting louder. I know if I stop writing, I won't last long. But I'm running out of things to say. My hands are tired. I'm tired, so tired. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. I need to keep writing, but I don't know what to say anymore. What's my name? I don't know. I'll die if I stop writing. I'll die if I stop working. Absurd con modest of books. Waker and fate scumped over the lazy dogs. Dodge, Buster. I miss Buster. I wish you could hit him one last time. But was he ever real? It is anything. I'm so tired, so hungry. I need to focus. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy goodbye. The quick brown sorry jumped of appointed you lazy dog stood by. Unquick jump at us the last time lazy dog. I'm sorry, jumped over disappointed you lazy. For the lazy dogs goodbye. I'm sorry, I disappointed you all. For the last time goodbye. A Midnight Visitor by John Kendrick Banks. I do not assert that what I am about to relate is in all its particulars absolutely true. Not, understand me, that it is not true, but I do not feel that I care to make an assertion that is more than likely to be received by a skeptical age with sneers of incredulity. I will content myself with a simple narration of the events of that evening, the memory of which is so indelibly impressed upon my mind, and which, were I able to do so, I should forget without any sentiments of regret whatsoever. The affair happened on the night before I fell ill of typhoid fever, and is about the sole remaining remembrance of that immediate period left to me. Briefly, the story is as follows. Notwithstanding the fact that I was overworked in the practice of my profession, it was early in March, and I was preparing my contributions for the coming Christmas issues of the periodicals for which I write. I had accepted the highly honorable position of entertainment committeeman at one of the small clubs to which I belonged. I accepted the office, supposing that the duties connected with it were easy of performance, and with absolutely no notion that the faith of my fellow committeemen in my judgment was so strong that they would ultimately manifest a desire to leave the whole program for the club's diversion in my hands. This, however, they did, and when the month of March assumed command of the calendar, I found myself utterly fagged out and at my wits' end to know what style of entertainment to provide for the club meeting to be held on the evening of the 15th of that month. I had provided already an unusually taking variety of evenings, of which one in particular, called the Martyr's Night, in which living authors ride through selections from their own works, while an inhuman audience, every man of whom had suffered even as the victims then suffered, sat on 10 score of camp stools puffing the smoke of 25 score of free cigars into their faces, and gloating over their misery, was extremely successful, and had gained for me among my professional brethren the enviable title of Machiavelli Jr. This performance, in fact, was the one now uppermost in the minds of the club members, having been the most recent of the series, and it had been prophesied by many men whose judgment was unassailable that no man, not even I, could ever conceive of anything that could surpass it. Disposed at first to question the accuracy of a prophecy to the effect that I was, like most others of my kind, possessed of limitations, I came finally to believe that perhaps, after all, these male Cassandras with whom I was thrown were right. Indeed, the more I racked my brains to think of something better than the Martyr's Night, the more I became convinced that in that achievement I had reached the zenith of my powers. The thing for me to do now was to hook myself securely onto the zenith and stay there. But how to do it? That was the question which drove sleep from my eyes, and deprived me for a period of 6 weeks of my reason, my hair departing immediately upon the restoration thereof a not uncommon after symptom of typhoid. It was a typical March night, this one upon which the extraordinary incident about to be related took place. It was the kind of night that novelists use when they are handling a mystery that in the abstract would amount to nothing, but which in the concrete of a bit of wild, weird, and windy nocturnalism sends the reader into hysterics. It may be I shall not attempt to deny it that had it happened upon another kind of an evening, a soft, mild, balmy June evening, for instance, my own experience would have seemed less worthy of preservation in the amber of publicity, but of that the reader must judge for himself. The fact alone remains that upon the night when my uncanny visitor appeared, the weather department was apparently engaged in getting rid of its remnants. There was a large percentage of withering blast in the general make-up of the evening. There were rain and snow, which alternated in pattering upon my window pane and whitening the apology for a wold that stands 3 blocks from my flat on Madison Square. The wind whistled as it always does upon occasions of this sort, and from all corners of my apartment, after the usual fashion, there seemed to come sounds of a supernatural order, the effect of which was to send cold chills off on their regular trips up and down the spine of their victim, in this instance myself. I wish that at the time the hackneyed quality of these sensations had appealed to me. That it did not do so was shown by the highly nervous state in which I found myself as my clock struck 11. If I could only have realized at that hour that these symptoms were the same old threadbare premonitions of the appearance of a supernatural being, I should have left the house and gone to the club, and so have avoided the visitation then imminent. Had I done this, I should doubtless also have escaped the typhoid, since the doctors attributed that misfortune to the shock of my experience, which, in my then wearied state, I was unable to sustain, and what the escape of typhoid would have meant to me only those who have seen the bills of my physician and druggist for services rendered and prescriptions compounded are aware. That my mind unconsciously took thought of spirits was shown by the fact that when the first chill came upon me I arose and poured out for myself a stiff bumper of old reserve rye, which I immediately swallowed, but beyond this I did not go. I simply sat there before my fire and cudgeled my brains for an idea whereby my fellow members at the Gutenberg Club might be amused. How long I sat there I do not know. It may have been 10 minutes. It may have been an hour. I was barely conscious of the passing of time, but I do know that the clock in the Dutch Reformed Church steeple at 29th Street and 5th Avenue was clanging out the first stroke of the hour of midnight when my doorbell rang. Therefore, if I may be allowed the word, the tintinnabulation of my doorbell had been invariably pleasing unto me. I am fond of company, and company alone was betokenned by its ringing, since my creditors gratify their passion for interviews at my office, if perchance they happen to find me there. But on this occasion I could not at the moment tell why its clanging seemed the very essence of discord. It jangled with my nervous system, and as it ceased I was conscious of a feeling of irritability which is utterly at variance with my nature outside of business hours. In the office, for the sake of discipline, I frequently adopt a querulous manner, finding it necessary in dealing with office boys, but the moment I leave shop behind me I become a different individual entirely, and have been called a moteless sunbeam by those who have seen only that side of my character. This, by the way, must be regarded as a confidential communication, since I am at present engaged in preparing a vest pocket edition of the philosophical works of Schopenhauer in words of one syllable, and were it known that but you did not destroy the red tie, said he, with a smile. You tore up your blue one, look. There it is on the floor. The red one you still have on. Investigation showed the truth of my visitor's assertion. That flaunting streamer of anarchy still made my neck infamous, and before me on the floor, an almost unrecognizable mass of shreds, lay my cherished cerulean tie. The revelation stunned me, tears came into my eyes, and trickling down over my cheeks, fairly hissed with the feverish heat of my flesh. My muscles relaxed, and I fell limp into my chair. You need stimulant, said my visitor, kindly. Go take a drop of your old reserve, and then come back here to me. I've something to say to you. Will you join me? I asked, faintly. No, returned the visitor. I am so fond of whiskey that I never molest it. That act which is your stimulant is death to the rot. Never realized that, did you? Halloween decorations bats wall D. Asterisk as an Amazon associate I earned from qualifying purchases. No, I never did, I said, meekly. And yet you claim to love it? Bah, he said. And then I obeyed his command, drained my glass to the dregs, and returned. What is your mission? I asked, when I had made myself as comfortable as was possible under the circumstances. To relieve you of your woes, he said. You are a homeopathy, I observe, said I, with a sneer. You are a homeopathy in theory and an allopath in practice. I am not usually unintelligent, said he. I fail to comprehend your meaning. Perhaps you express yourself badly. Are you satisfied now? I said, angrily. But I addressed an empty vestibule. There was absolutely no one there, and then I sat down on the mat and laughed. I never was so glad to see no one in my life. But my laugh was short-lived. What made that bell ring? I suddenly asked myself, and then the feeling of fear came upon me again. I gathered my somewhat shattered self together, sprang to my feet, slammed the door with such force that the corridors echoed to the sound, slid the bolt once more, turned the key, moved the heavy chair in front of it, and then fled like a frightened hare to the sideboard in my dining room. There I grasped the decanter holding my whiskey, seized a glass from the shelf, and started to pour out the usual dram, when the glass fell from my hand, and was shivered into 1,000 pieces on the hardwood floor, for, as I poured, I glanced through the open door, and there in my sanctum the flicker of a random flame divulged the form of a being, the eyes of whom seemed fixed on mine, piercing me through and through. To say that I was petrified but dimly expresses the situation. I was granitized, and so I remained, until by a more luminous flicker from the burning wood I perceived that the being wore a flaring red necktie. He is human, I thought, and with the thought the tension on my nervous system relaxed, and I was able to feel a sufficiently well-developed sense of indignation to demand an explanation. This is a mighty cool proceeding on your part, I said, leaving the sideboard and walking into the sanctum. Yes, he replied, in a tone that made me jump. It was so extremely sepulchral a tone that seemed as if it might have been acquired in a damp corner of some cave off the earth. But it's a cool evening. I wonder that a man of your coolness doesn't hire himself out to some refrigerating company, I remarked, with a sneer which would have delighted the soul of Cassius himself. I have thought of it, returned the being, calmly, but never went any further. Summer hotel proprietors have always outbid the refrigerating people, and they in turn have been laid low by millionaires, who have hired me on occasion to freeze out people they didn't like, but who have persisted in calling. I must confess, though, my dear Hiram, that you are not much warmer yourself. This greeting is hardly what I expected. Well, if you want to make me warmer, I retorted, hotly, just keep on calling me Hiram. How the deuce did you know of that blot on my escutcheon, anyhow? I added, for Hiram was one of the crimes of my family that I had tried to conceal, my parents having fastened the name of Hiram Spencer Carrington upon me at baptism for no reason other than that my rich bachelor uncle, who subsequently failed and became a charge upon me, was so named. I was standing at the door of the church when you were baptized, returned the visitor, and as you were an interesting baby, I have kept an eye on you ever since. Of course I knew that you discarded Hiram as soon as you got old enough to put away childish things, and since the failure of your uncle I have been aware that you desired to be known as Spencer Carrington, but to me you are, always have been, and always will be, Hiram. Well, don't give it away, I pleaded. I hope to be famous someday, and if the American newspaper paragrapher ever got hold of the fact that once in my life I was Hiram, I'd have to Hiram to let me alone. That's a bad joke, Hiram, said the visitor, and for that reason I like it, though I don't laugh. There is no danger of your becoming famous if you stick to humor of that sort. Well, I'd like to know, I put in, my anger returning. I'd like to know who in Brindisi you are, what in Cairo you want, and what in the name of the 17 hinges of the gates of Singapore you are doing here at this time of night. When you were a baby, Hiram, you had blue eyes, said my visitor. Bonny blue eyes, as the poet says. What of it? I asked. This, replied my visitor. If you have them now, you can very easily see what I am doing here. I am sitting down and talking to you. Oh, are you? I said, with fine scorn. I had not observed that. The fact is, my eyes were so weakened by the brilliance of that necktie of yours that I doubt I could see anything, not even one of my own jokes. It's a scorcher, that tie of yours. In fact, I never saw anything so red in my life. I do not see why you complain of my tie, said the visitor. Your own is just as bad. Blue is never so withering as red, I retorted, at the same time caressing the scarf I wore. Perhaps not, but if you will look in the glass, Hiram, you will observe that your point is not well taken, said my vis-a-vis, calmly. I acted upon the suggestion, and looked upon my reflection in the glass, lighting a match to facilitate the operation. I was horrified to observe that my beautiful blue tie, of which I was so proud, had in some manner changed, and was now of the same aggressive hue as was that of my visitor, red even as a brick is red. To grasp it firmly in my hands and tear it from my neck was the work of a moment, and then in a spirit of rage I turned upon my companion. See here, I cried, I've had quite enough of you. I can't make you out, and I can't say that I want to. You know where the door is. You will oblige me by putting it to its proper use. Sit down, Hiram, said he, and don't be foolish and ungrateful. You are behaving in a most extraordinary fashion, destroying your clothing and acting like a madman generally. What was the use of ripping up a handsome tie like that? I despise loud hues. Red is a jockey's color, I answered. But you did not destroy the red tie, said he, with a smile. You tore up your blue one. Look. There it is on the floor. The red one you still have on. Investigation showed the truth of my visitor's assertion. That flaunting streamer of anarchy still made my neck infamous, and before me on the floor, an almost unrecognizable mass of shreds, lay my cherished cerulean tie. The revelation stunned me, tears came into my eyes, and trickling down over my cheeks, fairly hissed with the feverish heat of my flesh. My muscles relaxed, and I fell limp into my chair. You need stimulant, said my visitor, kindly. Go take a drop of your old reserve, and then come back here to me. I've something to say to you. Will you join me? I asked, faintly. No, returned the visitor. I am so fond of whiskey that I never molest it. That act which is your stimulant is death to the rot. Never realized that, did you? No, I never did, I said, meekly. And yet you claim to love it? Bah, he said. And then I obeyed his command, drained my glass to the dregs, and returned. What is your mission? I asked, when I had made myself as comfortable as was possible under the circumstances. To relieve you of your woes, he said. You are a homeopathy, I observed, said I, with a sneer. You are a homeopathy in theory and an allopath in practice. I am not usually unintelligent, said he. I fail to comprehend your meaning. Perhaps you express yourself badly. I wish you'd express yourself for Zululand, I retorted, hotly. What I mean is, you believe in the similia similibus business, but you prescribe large doses. I don't believe troubles like mine can be cured on your plan. A man can't get rid of his stock by adding to it. Ah, I see. You think I have added to your troubles. I don't think so, I answered, with a fond glance at my ruined tuck. I know so. Well, wait until I have laid my plan before you, and see if you won't change your mind, said my visitor, significantly. All right, I said. Proceed. Only hurry. I go to bed early, as a rule, and it's getting quite early now. It's only 1 o'clock, said the visitor, ignoring the sarcasm. But I will hasten, as I've several other calls to make before breakfast. Are you a milkman? I asked. You are flippant, he replied. But, Hiram, he added, I have come here to aid you in spite of your unworthiness. You want to know what to provide for your club night on the 15th. You want something that will knock the martyr's night silly. Not exactly that, I replied. I don't want anything so abominably good as to make all the other things I have done seem failures. That is not good business. Would you like to be hailed as the discoverer of genius? Would you like to be the responsible agent for the greatest exhibition of skill in a certain direction ever seen? Would you like to become the most famous impresario the world has ever known? Infected more or less with his undoubtedly magnetized spirit. Now you're shouting. I thought so, Hiram. I thought so, and that's why I am here. I saw you on Wall Street today, and read your difficulty at once in your eyes, and I resolved to help you. I am a magician, and 1 or 2 little things have happened of late to make me wish to prestidigitate in public. I knew you were after a show of some kind, and I've come to offer you my services. Oh, pshaw, I said. The members of the Gutenberg Club are men of brains, not children. Card tricks are hackneyed, and sleight of hand shows Paul. Do they, indeed? Said the visitor. Well, mine won't. If you don't believe it, I'll prove to you what I can do. I have no paraphernalia, I said. Well, I have, said he, and as he spoke, a pack of cards seemed to grow out of my hands. I must have turned pale at this unexpected happening, for my visitor smiled, and said, Don't be frightened. That's only one of my tricks. Now choose a card, he added, and when you have done so toss the pack in the air. Don't tell me what the card is, it alone will fall to the floor. Nonsense, said I. It's impossible. Do as I tell you. I did as he told me, to a degree only. I tossed the cards in the air without choosing one, although I made a feint of doing so. Not a card fell back to the floor. They every one disappeared from view in the ceiling. If it had not been for the heavy chair I had rolled in front of the door, I think I should have fled. How's that for a trick? Asked my visitor. I said nothing, for the very good reason that my words stuck in my throat. Give me a little creme de menthe, will you, please? Said he, after a moment's pause. I haven't a drop in the house, I said, relieved to think that this wonderful being could come down to anything so earthly. Shaw, Hiram. He ejaculated, apparently in disgust. Don't be mean, and, above all, don't lie. Why, man, you've got a bottle full of it in your hand. Do you want it all? He was right. Where it came from I do not know, but, beyond question, the graceful, slim-necked bottle was in my right hand, and my left held a liqueur glass of exquisite form. Say, I gasped, as soon as I was able to collect my thoughts, what are your terms? Wait a moment, he answered. Let me do a little mind reading before we arrange preliminaries. I haven't much of a mind to read tonight, I answered, wildly. You're right there, said he. It's like a dime novel, that mind of yours tonight. But I'll do the best I can with it. Suppose you think of your favorite poem, and after turning it over in your mind carefully for a few minutes, select 2 lines from it, concealing them, of course, from me, and I will tell you what they are. Now my favorite poem, I regret to say, is Lewis Carroll's Jabberwock, a fact I was ashamed to confess to an utter stranger, so I tried to deceive him by thinking of some other lines. The effort was hardly successful, for the only other lines I could call to mind at the moment were from Rudyard Kipling's rhyme, The Post That Fitted, and which ran, year by year, in pious patience, vengeful Mrs. Boffin sits waiting for the Sleary babies to develop Sleary's fits. Humph! Ejaculated my visitor. You're a great Hiram, you are. And then rising from his chair and walking to my poet's corner, the magician selected 2 volumes. There, said he, handing me the departmental ditties. You'll find the lines you tried to fool me with at the foot of page 13. Look. I looked, and there lay that vile Sleary sentiment, in all the majesty of type, staring me in the eyes. And here, added my visitor, opening Alice in the Looking-Glass dash, here is the poem that to your mind holds all the philosophy of life. Come to my arms, my beamish boy, he chortled in his joy. I blushed and trembled. Blushed that he should discover the weakness of my taste, trembled at his power. I don't blame you for coloring, said the magician. But I thought you said the Gutenberg was made up of men of brains. Do you think you could stay on the rolls a month if they were aware that your poetic ideals are summed up in the Jabberwock and Sleary's fits? My taste might be far worse, I answered. Yes, it might. You might have stooped to liking some of your own verses. I ought really to congratulate you, I suppose, retorted the visitor, with a sneering laugh. This roused my ire again. Who are you, anyhow, that you come here and take me to task? I demanded, angrily. I'll like anything I please, and without asking your permission. If I cared more for the Petterkin papers than I do for Shakespeare, I wouldn't be accountable to you, and that's all there is about it. Never mind who I am, said the visitor. Suffice to say that I am myself. You will know my name soon enough. In fact, you will pronounce it involuntarily the first thing when you wake in the morning, and then here he shook his head ominously, and I felt myself grow rigid with fright in my chair. Now for the final trick, he said, after a moment's pause. Think of where you would most like to be at this moment, and I'll exert my power to put you there. Only close your eyes first. I closed my eyes and wished. When I opened them I was in the billiard room of the Gutenberg Club with Perkins and Thompson. For heaven's sake, Spencer, they said, in surprise, where did you drop in from? Why, man, you are as white as a sheet. And what a necktie. Take it off. Grab hold of me, boys, and hold me fast, I pleaded, falling on my knees in terror. If you don't, I believe I'll die. The idea of returning to my sanctum was intolerably dreadful to me. Ha! Ha! Laughed the magician, for even as I spoke to Perkins and Thompson I found myself seated opposite my infernal visitor in my room once more. They couldn't keep you an instant with me summoning you back. His laughter was terrible, his frown was pleasanter. and I felt myself gradually losing control of my senses. "Go," I cried. "Leave me, or you will have the crime of murder on your conscience." "I have no he began, but I heard no more. That is the last I remember of that fearful night. I must have fainted, and then have fallen into a deep slumber. When I waked it was morning, and I was alone, but undressed and in bed, unconscionably weak, and surrounded by medicine bottles of many kinds. The clock on the mantel on the other side of the room indicated that it was after 10 o'clock. Great Beelzebub! I cried, taking note of the hour. I've an engagement with Barlow at 9. And then a sweet-faced woman, who, I afterwards learned, was a professional nurse, entered the room, and within an hour I realized two facts. One was that I had lain ill for many days, and that my engagement with Barlow was now for 6 weeks unfulfilled. The other, that my midnight visitor was none other than. And yet I don't know. His tricks certainly were worthy of that individual, but Perkins and Thompson assert that I never entered the club that night, and surely if my visitor was Beelzebub himself he would not have omitted so important a factor of success as my actual presence in the billiard room on that occasion would have been, and, besides, he was altogether too cool to have come from his reputed residence. Altogether I think the episode most unaccountable, particularly when I reflect that while no trace of my visitor was discoverable in my room the next morning, as my nurse tells me, my blue necktie was in reality found upon the floor, crushed and torn into a shapeless bundle of frayed rags. As for the club entertainment, I am told that, despite my absence, it was a wonderful success, redeemed from failure, the treasurer of the club said, by the voluntary services of a guest, who secured admittance on one of my cards, and who executed some sleight of hand tricks that made the members tremble, and whose mind-reading feats performed on the club's butler not only made it necessary for him to resign his office, but disclosed to the house committee the whereabouts of several cases of rare wines that had mysteriously disappeared. A Vine on a House by Ambrose Bierce. About 3 miles from the little town of Norton, in Missouri, on the road leading to Maysville, stands an old house that was last occupied by a family named Harding. Since 1886 no one has lived in it, nor is anyone likely to live in it again. Time and the disfavor of persons dwelling thereabout are converting it into a rather picturesque ruin. An observer unacquainted with its history would hardly put it into the category of haunted houses, yet in all the region round such is its evil reputation. Its windows are without glass, its doorways without doors, there are wide breaches in the shingle roof, and for lack of paint the weatherboarding is a dun gray. But these unfailing signs of the supernatural are partly concealed and greatly softened by the abundant foliage of a large vine overrunning the entire structure. This vine of a species which no botanist has ever been able to name has an important part in the story of the house. The Harding family consisted of Robert Harding, his wife Matilda, Miss Julia Wendt, who was her sister, and 2 young children. Robert Harding was a silent, cold-mannered man who made no friends in the neighborhood and apparently cared to make none. He was about 40 years old, frugal and industrious, and made a living from the little farm which is now overgrown with brush and brambles. He and his sister-in-law were rather tabooed by their neighbors, who seemed to think that they were seen too frequently together, not entirely their fault, for at these times they evidently did not challenge observation. The moral code of rural Missouri is stern and exacting. Mrs. Harding was a gentle, sad-eyed woman, lacking a left foot. At some time in 1884 it became known that she had gone to visit her mother in Iowa. That was what her husband said in reply to inquiries, and his manner of saying it did not encourage further questioning. She never came back, and 2 years later, without selling his farm or anything that was his, or appointing an agent to look after his interests, or removing his household goods, Harding, with the rest of the family, left the country. Nobody knew whither he went, nobody at that time cared. Naturally, Whatever was movable about the place soon disappeared, and the deserted house became haunted in the manner of its kind. One summer evening, 4 or 5 years later, the Reverend J. Gruber, of Norton, and a Maysville attorney named Hyatt met on horseback in front of the Harding place. Having business matters to discuss, they hitched their animals and going to the house sat on the porch to talk. Some humorous reference to the somber reputation of the place was made and forgotten as soon as uttered, and they talked of their business affairs until it grew almost dark. The evening was oppressively warm, the air stagnant. Presently both men started from their seats in surprise. A long vine that covered half the front of the house and dangled its branches from the edge of the porch above them was visibly and audibly agitated, shaking violently in every stem and leaf. "We shall have a storm," Hyatt exclaimed. Gruber said nothing, but silently directed the other's attention to the foliage of adjacent trees. WHI movement. Even the delicate tips of the boughs silhouetted against the clear sky were motionless. They hastily passed down the steps to what had been a lawn and looked upward at the vine, whose entire length was now visible. It continued in violent agitation, yet they could discern no disturbing cause. "Showed no. Let us leave," said the minister. And leave they did. Forgetting that they had been traveling in opposite directions, they rode away together. They went to Norton, where they related their strange experience to several discreet friends. The next evening, at about the same hour, accompanied by 2 others whose names are not recalled, they were again on the porch of the Harding house, and again the mysterious phenomenon occurred. The vine was violently agitated while under the closest scrutiny from root to tip, nor did their combined strength applied to the trunk serve to still it. After an hour's observation they retreated, no less wise, it is thought, than when they had come. No great time was required for these singular facts to rouse the curiosity of the entire neighborhood. By day and by night crowds of persons assembled at the Harding house seeking a sign. It does not appear that any found it, yet so credible were the witnesses mentioned that none doubted the reality of the manifestations to which they testified. By either a happy inspiration or some destructive design, it was one day proposed nobody appeared to know from whom the suggestion came to dig up the vine, and after a good deal of debate this was done. Nothing was found but the root, yet nothing could have been more strange. For 5 or 6 feet from the trunk, which had at the surface of the ground a diameter of several inches, it ran downward, single and straight, into a loose, friable earth. Then it divided and subdivided into rootlets, fibers, and filaments, most curiously interwoven. When carefully freed from soil they showed a singular formation. In their ramifications and doublings back upon themselves they made a compact network, having in size and shape an amazing resemblance to the human figure. Head, trunk, and limbs were there. Even the fingers and toes were distinctly defined, and many professed to see in the distribution and arrangement of the fibers in the globular mass representing the head a grotesque suggestion of a face. The figure was horizontal. The smaller roots had begun to unite at the breast. In point of resemblance to the human form, this image was imperfect. At about 10 inches from one of the knees, the cilia forming that leg had abruptly doubled backward and inward upon their course of growth. The figure lacked the left foot. There was but one inference, the obvious one, but in the ensuing excitement as many courses of action were proposed as there were incapable counselors. The matter was settled by the sheriff of the county, who as the lawful custodian of the abandoned estate ordered the root replaced and the excavation filled with the earth that had been removed. Later inquiry brought out only one fact of relevancy and significance. Mrs. Harding had never visited her relatives in Loa, nor did they know that she was supposed to have done so. Of Robert Harding and the rest of his family nothing is known. The house retains its evil reputation, but the replanted vine is as orderly and well-behaved a vegetable as a nervous person could wish to sit under of a pleasant night, when the katydids grate out their immemorial revelation and the distant whippoorwill signifies his notion of what ought to be done about it. Paranormal, a ghost story. Grandma loves me from the other side. I am a 25-year-old female. For the purpose of anonymity I will refer to myself as Sabrina. I am from Romania, English is not my native language, but I shall try my best to make the story easy to be understood. My stories contain what you would call angels, spirits, demons, archangels, satanic people doing forbidden sessions of voodoo and everything, but for this particular story, I sort of believe this is not necessarily a bad encounter, or so I lie to myself sometimes. There are many stories that I would love to share with you. You can either decide to share them, I don't mind, but mainly I just wish to talk with someone who has went through what I did and can understand and empathize with it based on your personal experiences. The one story that I can and will share with you for now. I live in Romania. Our country has Orthodox religion, basically very similar to Christianity. We believe in God and Jesus Christ, with small certain similarities and differences. For example, I don't know if it's the same as Catholics do. We keep the deceased for a night. We call it the sleeping duty or guard night. We do not take that body out of its house they have lived in for their entire life in order to help the spirit find its way to heaven easier. The next 2 days, as we bury the bodies, after 3 days, we take the body to the church where loved ones, but not relatives, to the deceased may come and pay respects to that person. After this process concluded, we bury the body at the cemetery where the priest will chant prayers helping the spirit of the deceased understand that they are no longer among the living, as Romanians are very spiritual people and believe in the afterlife, spirits, and even in bad spirits that linger the world unable to move on. Understanding this is important as the story is pretty detailed itself. I had 5 grandparents, 3 grandmothers and 2 grandfathers. My first grandfather, we shall call him Michael, died when I was 6 years old due to a heart attack in August 2007. He raised me, and his death marked my life ever since because I couldn't grasp the significance of death. I would frequently dream about him, his messages, his signs. I would hear him in my dreams as he would guide me to be a good person and so on. But even then, as a child, I knew what was a dream and what was reality. His wife, whom we shall call Anna, was my adoptive grandmother, as my real by blood grandmother, named Margaret, has died when my mom was 2 years old due to an abortion. I'm not sure if she was trying to abort my mother or a third child, since my mother has a brother and she was the second child. During the communist years, 1946 to 1989, Romania had a strict law regarding abortions, and women would abort the fetuses on their own, in the privacy of their homes by themselves, as no medics would agree to help with the procedure due to fear of being sentenced to life in prison. She died of septicemia, and my mother grew up without a mother until the age of 6 years old. Needless to say, I never met her or knew anything about Margaret, my blood grandmother. But this story is about my grandmother, adoptive one, named Anna. She was a very spiritual, wise, kind-hearted, and intelligent woman. She never had children of her own. She adopted my mom and uncle. Their names aren't important for the story. My grandfather, Michael, was only dating my grandmother, but after my mother had met her on a family visit on her side in Iași, Moldova, it's a town in Romania, they got married soon after. My grandfather was a military general, and raising 2 children of 6 years and 13 years was hard. How they decided to get married? Well, it was thanks to my mother, because as soon as she first saw Grandma Anna, she went straight to her, at the age of 6, raised her both arms up at her and asked, in a jolly child voice, "Hi, my name is Christina, would you like to be my mommy?" My grandmother burst in tears, picked her up, and immediately created a connection with my mother, whom she raised and loved as her own. It was not the same for my uncle, as he was 13 at that time and knew his own mother. Margaret had died, and what? He denounced her and made her life much harder. After raising my mom and uncle, my uncle had 2 children of her own, a boy and a girl. She raised the girl, and when the boy was born she had a calcium crisis that made her faint and hit her head. She refused to raise my cousin afterwards, as she was afraid she would drop holding the baby. My uncle never forgave her for that and hated her even more. When I was born, I was the light of their life, as she loved my mother from moment one, and my grandfather Michael adored my mother. Because I am a replica of my mother. Same eyes, same face, same body shape. They immediately took me in and raised me as my father worked in 3 different jobs and my mom was a pediatric nurse and worked in shifts. I loved growing up with her. Like I said, she was an extremely spiritual person. She loved to meditate. She would tell me about her dreams. She taught me how to decode them and what it meant. She told me about ghost encounters she had in her life and always told me not to fear any spirit that comes close to me in my life because ghosts see us as beams of light guiding them to God when they are confused. Yes, that was my grandmother Anna for you. She did this until I was 18 years old. We were very close, and I was living 5 minutes away from her, so I would visit her daily, sometimes still sleep at her place. Her hobby was to read the future in some cards she had owned, not tarot cards, but normal cards with some inscriptions she had, such as encounter with mysterious man, beware, crying child, careful, dangerous woman. I can give you photos of the pack. It's just that the words are in Romanian, but I can translate them for you if you wish. Also, I would have to go to my parents' house since I have moved from there and the cards deck remained there. On the New Year morning of 2017, at 3:15 a.m., I called my grandma Anna to wish her a happy new year and to let her know how much I and my family loved her and appreciated her. I'd like to mention that Romanians rarely express their love by saying I love you to our mothers, fathers, grandparents. We consider that you show your love by what you do in your life and how you respect them rather than just say the words. But that night, for the first time in 23 years, at that time, in 2017, I felt the need to tell her that. I still don't know what. Her voice changed. You could hear her chuckle in soft happy tears as she would hear that and said she loves us all back and forever will. Nothing seemed suspicious as I am a very sensitive and emotional woman myself, so the night went on normally. She was at a party. I was with my fiancé's house. The next day, January 1st, 2017 at 17:30 p.m., I receive a phone call from my father who told me that Grandma Anna had died the previous night. I couldn't express in words how my heart simply left my body, as if my own existence stopped, refusing to acknowledge that she was dead. I rushed home. The police was there. The ambulance was there. They say she died of a heart attack due to the climate change. Same as my grandfather Michael did 11 years before her by the same cause. Outside it was cold. Inside the house it was too hot, and as she was rushing to change her clothes, her heart couldn't handle the temperature change. Her body couldn't balance the heat. And she died. But what I found particularly weird is the time of death. I still had her last phone call, 3:15 a.m. The policemen and ambulance staff analyzed her and declared her time of death was around midnight. They said there was no way I could have talked to her at 3:15 a.m. as for by that time the body would have already began the rigor mortis stage. Who did I talk to? Because it was her phone number, it was her voice, and she seemed incredibly fine. Call it a sick joke or just medical staff time of death error. Creepy. During her funeral, I decided to write her a goodbye letter as I am very spiritual, and even though no one will read it, I like to consider she took the message I had for her in heaven to pass it down to my other grandmother, Margaret, and 2 grandfathers, Michael and Peter. I wrote in that letter that I do love her a lot, that I thank her for every sacrifice she has done for me, and that I wish to tell Margaret, the real grandmother which I have never met because she died from an abortion long before I was born, that I love her too although I have never met her. I put that letter in my grandmother's coffin, kissed her forehead and watched her go on her last road. My mom knows about the letter. She yet has asked me about what I wrote in it. After her funeral, I get a phone call from my grandmother. Yes, my Nana Anna. At first I thought it was my father, as he would still use her phone to let all our relatives from other countries that she has died. So normally, I answer the phone, and I hear something unimaginable, impossible, formidable. I hear my Nana Anna. I hear her voice clearly. I hear her lovely voice, with intermittence and static occurring whenever she would pause. It was a soft, fading voice, but nothing scary, nothing fearful or intimidating. It made me feel like she was indeed there, but I will admit the whole situation did freak me out. She said to me, "Hello dear, I called to let you know I passed the message and I love you too." I couldn't reply, as the phone call hung up right after. It left me feel so vulnerable as I thought maybe someone is playing a sick joke, but it couldn't be that. I saw my Nana be buried myself. I saw the coffin be sealed. I saw the letter exist inside the coffin until the very last second. No one took it out to read it. She had 3 sisters, but they were all dead and none of them had her voice. No one could have repeated her voice that perfectly. But the even scarier part comes after that first phone call. After another week, I remember it was during another day of Monday, right 1 week after the first phone call, my phone starts ringing again under the same number. I answer. Already have forgotten about what has happened and I hear an old lady, a voice I couldn't feel familiar. I did not know who that lady was. It was a pretty soft but strong voice. It felt like a relatively young woman, but inexperienced. I would say around 30 to 40 years or so. I would like to mention that this time I was in the same room with my father, who owned her phone still, and I received the call. Her phone is in front of me on the table and not ringing. I open her phone as I speak on my phone. Her phone had no battery and it was dead closed, but I still get her phone call. I answer. I hear this weird lady, and she goes like this, "Hello sweetheart. You don't know me but I do. I received your message and I love you too." Then the phone call hangs up again. Needless to say, I started screaming and panicking so hard that my dad immediately went to the telephone service to find out who is playing pranks on us. They went through her profile, numbers dialed and received. My number was not in her agenda of calls, so we decided to disable her number. Ever since then we do not receive calls anymore. But I do go to the cemetery more often and talk to them. This year is the first year from her death, so we are sort of celebrating her memory. But for me, personally, I do not celebrate her memory as I feel she is constantly physically with me. I often have dreams of her. She would often visit me at nights. I'm saying dreams because I feel like I am going insane if I ever conclude on these situations being something other than dreams. I guess I am trying to thank you for giving me the possibility to share this with you. If you want to share my story further, to all the people out there who encounter ghosts or paranormal activity, I am going to say what my grandmother and it taught me all my life. Do not be afraid of them, as they are just confused lost souls, who see you as beams of light helping them to find God. The way you feel about them will conclude in the way they react, and afterwards end up scaring you.